Nigerians are expected to seek out the best.
Two words to describe the activity.
The Yoruba Unity Forum is conducted.
Be the first to know. From the north, south, east, west and around Africa.
Presidential
we break the news.
Women in Nigeria.
Now you can catch all the actions live as the news breaks. We are Core TV News.
Welcome to Core TV Primetime
News. A 24-hour news station.
It's about just 15 more days before the much talked about May 29 handover. They say it's quite historic. It's the first time a sitting president will lose an election in the political history of Nigeria. And much people, much expectations from Nigerians at this time for the APC that has for so long preached the message of change. This time they have not only won the presidency, they have majority at the National Assembly. They have about 22 states out of 36. And now it's about time to find out if they are equal to the task. Today, we're looking at the very peculiar situation that Nigeria found itself in the midst of full scarcity, unpaid salaries by many states. Osun, for instance, hasn't paid salary for over 5 months. And many are saying that even with the situation of epileptic power supply, even at the center of the privatization innovation, that it's not really a good time, not only for the incumbent administration, but for the messenger of change. I'm joined by two analysts on the show today. Achike Chu, as a public affairs analyst. Thank you very much for coming again.
Pleasure.
Debuting on the show today, we have Yemi Saka, is a journalist as well as a public affairs analyst. Thanks for coming.
You're welcome. It's nice to be here.
All right, let me start with you, Yemi. It's the first time I'm having you on the show. Let's start with an overview of what we call the outgoing administration. There seem to be two sides of the divide. Some are of the opinion that the Jonathan-led administration had done its best given the peculiar time and challenges being faced by the country.
Well, a brief summation, I'll just say that this outgoing administration did so well at doing nothing. That's a summation. Did so well at doing nothing. Because as my conviction or opinion, this administration did nothing. Squandered the Google in 5 years.
When you say they did so well at doing nothing, many can also identify some other things they've done, especially in the agricultural sector, the move made, you know, at the power sector, for instance. Many are just saying that this is a rot that has been on ground for quite a while, that wouldn't be expecting too much for the Jonathan-led administration.
Okay, let's itemize it. It's not agriculture. The bedrock of agriculture in Nigeria is the northern axis. You have the northeast and the northwest. This region has been plagued with insurgency. People can't go to farm. People can't move their produce from the farm to the market, even down to the south. The best source of fish in Nigeria is Maiduguri. And Borno State has been under insurgency, has been plagued with insurgency in the last 4 or 5 years. So how can you achieve anything when the environment is not suitable enough for you to do anything there? Talk about power. The privatization of the power sector, it's laughable to some of us, because fine, we need to decentralize. Government has no business in business. But the question is, what they did, to the best of my knowledge, is just privatize the distribution arm of government, of power generation. Not even generation of power itself.
We're going to get to all of those details. Let me come to you, Chief, very quickly. Do you agree with them? Many have also pointed out the fact that the issue of Boko Haram is germane to what could have been the success or failure of the outgoing administration.
Well, people have different takes on this. There are those who would, even at this moment, swear by Jonathan that he had done well for this country. And of course, you know that in the build-up to the election itself, there were different camps. There were those who believed that who were in so much of a hurry to get rid of him, believing that he had not improved their lives and he had not improved the country. But there were those who were willing to stand by him, and they felt that he had done, enough. But the reality is that it's not about people's sentiments, it's not about opinions, it's not about people's views. It's about facts and figures. Because you can always measure government. There are indices for measuring development, success, progress in the society. And then you look at the various sectors of the political economy of Nigeria, and then you weigh all of these sectors, carefully, look at the facts and then ask yourself, for instance, are we better off today than, is where we are? Are we okay with it? You look at the economy. What is the state of the Nigerian economy today? Look at the foreign exchange, for instance, issue. We have had to devalue our currency so much in the recent past. Then you talk about the financial sector, what is going on with the banks. Now we have a phenomenon that has gotten to an all-time high, where casualization has become the in word, in the byword, even not just in the labor market in Nigeria, more or less, even in banks, places that you do not expect, oil sector, and so on. This is an indication in a way that all is not well with the economy, for instance. And so then you talk about other areas, even before you get to the issue of security. You could say, okay, fine, security, the government did not contribute to security. I mean, to these security breaches that we've had in the past, the insurgency by Boko Haram and the rest. The government has no responsibility for that. They did not create it and so on. But the environment for that had been created a long time ago as a result of years of abuse of the politics of this country and the economy of this country and so on. But where you would also hold Jonathan responsible for the security situation was his inability to read the handwriting on the wall, his inability to understand that this thing is much bigger than they felt it was. And because they never believed it was as serious as it was, they did not give it the due attention that it required. So all of these things, you look at them, and then of course you talk about the power situation. Some of us, had protested. I remember when we had to protest from, I think, the NLC secretariat, building in Yaba, all the way, on foot to Marina, in protest of the privatization plan, because we felt that this privatization will not solve any of the issues. And we were making arguments at that time, because as at that time the Bureau for Public Enterprises had told us that only 10% of the companies that were privatized, of the enterprises that were privatized in this country, public enterprises, were working at optimal level. So it means that 90% of the privatization exercise had been a failure. And so if you have not removed all those things that constitute a cog in the wheel of progress during the privatization exercise, why would you not want to also go to the whole hog in privatizing, an institution like NEPA, as important as it is?
Let me just hold you there for a minute,
issues,
Achike, because we're still going to spend some time talking about the peculiarity of the challenges as they were. But have you been able to identify the yardstick to which you have measured this outgoing administration? Because I heard you say they've done, nothing over this period of time.
Yeah, well, it's very simple. I think Section 15 of the Constitution says the primary order going to proceed to the protection of the lives,
It's welfare and security.
Well-being. And if that's the primary function of the government, and they've not done that, the government has failed. Over time, we've had Nigerians being displaced. Nigerians are refugees in their country.
How do you place the position of Nigeria as Africa's largest economy during this tenure?
Well, fine, so fine, so fantastic that we have to base our economy tries under this present administration for us to achieve that. And the fact, and I called that, rain alert. I did a course when I was in university. I was studying mathematics. It's something called abstract algebra and rain analysis. Abstract algebra is when you talk about abstract things. Rain analysis is when you do the rain analysis, okay, this is what is on ground. The rebasing is an abstract economic feat. There's nothing to substantiate it. Yeah, the GDP of Nigeria has naturally revised because people have died, the population has reduced, the population against what is victim. So I don't see the exchange rate is, like you said, is optimally high. The take-home pay of an average Nigerian can't take their home. Poverty is killing in Nigeria. So how do we now see the largest economy in Africa? It's on paper. It's not in the real world. And the real thing is the governance is in the real world, not on paper.
No, I think that I would slightly disagree with him. The reality is that I would agree when he talks about, in reference to the Constitution, the primary duty and purpose of governance to provide for the welfare of the people and so on. But the reality, I do not think that the rebasing thing is an abstract thing. Yes, it might not have translated to a better life for Nigerians, and I agree with him 100% on that. But it is the reality. How do you determine the GDP of a country? These things are empirically verifiable, data. you know, you look at the gross domestic product, you know, gross national product and so on and so forth, divided by the number of population and so on, and that gives you an idea of what a country's GDP is and so on. These are economic terms, you know. But beyond that, even before the rebasing was done, even before the public knowledge, you know, it was Nigeria was internationally acknowledged as, you know, the biggest economy in Africa. Nigeria was already the biggest economy in Africa. The only difference was that it had not been brought to the public view, because there was nothing new that was done. All of the indices that were used to determine that Nigeria was the biggest economy were already there. So what the government did was just to go through the formality of saying, look, computing some other sectors of the economy that had not been captured, like, you know, Nollywood, entertainment industry, and so on and so forth. When they did that, you know, and then did the other calculations that they do,
and the informal sector,
you understand, they were able to now make a pronouncement that Nigeria was the biggest economy in Africa. That one is not, it's a reality, that is the truth. But the reality again is this, you know, you're looking at, you know, the lives of the people. You're looking at the essence of governance. What does a government do, and so on. And so when you look at all of these things, you realize that in spite of the size of Nigerian economy, in spite of the so-called successes that they keep on telling us about, Nigeria is growing at 7% GDP, you know, every year, and all the other things they keep on telling us. You know, we have created the 1.4 million jobs in the country, and then people don't see it. The reality is, I mean, 1.4 million is still significant. That constitutes about maybe 0.8% of the Nigerian population. So if you have taken this number of people out of the unemployment market and so on, that will be significant. It will be noticeable. But so these were just lies, I think, that were being churned out by the government in order to justify, you know, the feeling that something is actually happening.
Something good can still
You understand?
I'm really concerned about why now, because prior to Goodluck Jonathan, we had Umaru Musa Yar'Adua, we had, you know, Olusegun Obasanjo, and, well, except you're saying that there's a remarkable fallout or a remarkable decline from what the welfare of the people used to be, considering also that the population in Nigeria is on the increase, you know, over the years. What was that remarkable difference from this present administration relative to what the PDP government had offered Nigerians since inception in 1999?
Well, let me say, sincerity of purpose and strong leadership, that's the difference we have here. And if we want to talk about the economy growing at 7%, it's been there since the Obasanjo state. The economy has been growing at 7%. So this government has done nothing new. It's just building, and this government did not build on the existing structures or existing success of past administrations. They keep on brandishing transformation agenda. Let me do the real transformation. The real transformation was brought on board by Obasanjo administration. The locomotive trains they're brandishing about that was brought by this was even delivered in 2009 to the Yar'Adua administration. The fast rail system from Abuja to Kaduna was signed by Obasanjo. The only thing this present administration did in line with this rail transformation was just to sign a supplementary agreement in 2012. So these are, like you said, the lies that they keep bringing out to the public. And when Nigerians start puncturing these lies and start picking nose in these claims, we get agitated. And we get so irritated that we just want to kick this government out. Because once the government has lost trust, and there's a breach of trust, then you can't stay in government.
Let's start with power, because there are about 3 focal points here that we'll want to discuss as it relates to the reality of governance and, you know, the reality of welfare obtainable by the average Nigerian person. The Goodluck Jonathan-led administration made that bold step in privatizing that sector, you know, of the economy. At inception, it was a welcome idea, because the idea they gave us was that was the challenge. The moment it gets into the hands of private owners, then power will be stable. I recall Mr. President say, I think it was in 2013, talking about what Nigerians should expect at the first quarter of 2014. It's 2015 now. The views are unimaginable, and the service is not also obtainable. In your opinion, what are the challenges in this area?
Well, it's maybe you were happy with the privatization exercise, because we are saying that Nigerians were happy. I was not happy with that. And maybe some other Nigerians, but I kicked against it. I was one of those that, and I told you that we mobilized people. We did the protest, you know, over the privatization issue, because the whole thing is a scam. you know, and just like so many other things. And I just gave you, you know, an insight into the successes or failures of the privatization exercise. The BPE, Bureau for Public Enterprises, that midwifed and supervised the privatization exercise, itself declared that 90% of public enterprises privatized by the government had ended in failure, or more or less, you know. And so if that was the case, what was the guarantee that privatizing energy would change things? I mean, you keep on, you know, doing the same thing and expecting, you know, a different result. It's not going to happen. And then again, we even questioned the entirety of the privatization scheme. Some of these things, measures that have been imposed on Nigeria, you know, as a result, you know, by the Bretton Woods Institute, you know, World Bank, IMF, and the rest. You know, everybody's going, yes, it's a global economy. It's about free market. It's a free market economy. It's about the laws of demand and supplies, and so on and so forth. But government has duties. We've always made that, you know, a point. Government has obligations to the people. Government has no business handing over certain assets, certain national assets that belong to the people, to private ownership. Where is government's responsibility? They make the argument, like my friend has also said, government has no business in business. Only to some extent. It is the duty and responsibility of government to protect the people. And so even when you privatize certain, you know, enterprises of government, government must have very strong regulatory, you know, input in the entire exercise. Even after they have come on stream, they must have, you know, institutions and, you know, control mechanisms, supervisory mechanisms to ensure that the people are not exploited by private, you know, ownership, because that is the essence of private enterprises. They are there to make profit, sometimes to the detriment, you know, of the people that they are supposed to provide services to. They exploit the people. Some time ago, I mean, America being, you know, run as a completely free market economy, there was a situation where a particular, I can't remember now, it's been quite some time, you know, where I think the government took a public enterprise to task for charging the people in terms of making too much profit, you know, from the sweat of the people. It would appear that their services, either the goods or services that they were given to the people, were highly priced. And the government said, no, you cannot make any kind of profit. It's obscene profit. So that is some kind of regulation. But in Nigeria, it's a completely different thing. So the energy thing, I knew it wasn't going to work, because from the very beginning, you understand, there was no way it was going to work. First
I'll
of
take you
all,
up from that.
yeah, but it's important because corruption also plays a role. Who are the people that bought all of this, you know, private? I mean, you want to privatize the revenue, you know, section of, for instance, the electricity, you know, in this country. He just said the most important critical aspect of it, generation, was not privatized. Government, after privatization, continued to put billions of money into that same exercise. But we know from what we have been told that, you know, that certain people in this country who have been in government, who some of them are still in government, some of them are outside government but closely related with government, are the people that bought most of these, you know,
I'll be back with you on that. I want to know if you share the same idea with the whole ideology of privatization, because what the average Nigerian would understand is at least having a 12-hour power supply on a daily basis. You know, the average Nigerian will tell you that it happens in Ghana. They will tell you it happens in neighboring. They will even tell you that Nigeria gives power to some of these smaller countries.
Yeah, the contractual agreements has to be fulfilled. You can't be just. I was told that Nigeria, even the NNPC has to supply Benin Republic gas because there's an existing contract obligation that has to be met. Yeah, but in line with what he said, I agree with him to we have to be very large extent. But there's something like the government doesn't have business in government. Like I said, I'll still stand by it. The role of government in such business and enterprises to set up regulatory bodies and, you know, things in place, put structures in place. Like in UK, for instance, when Margaret Thatcher came on board, she met something similar to this, and she took government away from business and sold everything. Well, now okay, fine. There's a mobile company now that's about to be bought over, and that will create the largest market. They're going to have the largest consumer or customer base in UK. Now they have to take it to the British to the UK economic board. Then if you scale that, okay, this is not going to bring about monopoly and anything. It's not going to go to the European Union economic board. So these are things, regulatory bodies that the Nigerian government should put in place. There won't be monopoly and exploitation of Nigerians or consumers. And like you rightly said again, you've privatized the distribution arm of power in Nigeria. But Nigerian government is still spending and pumping money into changing the distribution lines, buying this turbine, repairing this turbine. For these people to make money at our expense, you're spending our money to give these people the infrastructure they need to exploit us.
But what would you have them rather do? Because on one hand, you are saying it's not totally privatized because they are still in charge of generation. But on the other hand, you also made mention of corruption, because there's this idea of what happens with the civil service. When you give it to the civil service, there is no much energy, at work, as it is when it's with a private, owner that knows that it's my money in it. The average civil servant will tell you, well, whether I work or not, my salary gets paid at the end of the month.
Yeah, you're right, and it's in a bid to protect the national interest. That's why governments over time have had stakes in the likes of PCN and NPC to protect the Nigerian interest, and it came out into being as a result of the deep mistrust by among the political class, when you have people fighting or building regional blocks rather than being patriotic or nationalistic in their approach or that kind of issues. So that's why we have things like this, and it's going to breed corruption because of the bureaucracy and what you have in place as we speak. But there are first of all, for us to have power in this country, we have to revisit the National Electric Regulatory Bill that says that if you generate anything beyond 50 megawatts, you have to send it to the national grid. It's still there, and you're privatizing PCN. So now I can't come into Nigeria, generate 100,000, let's say 100,000 megawatts, and I have to first send to the national grid. Then how do I recoup my investments? How do I get the adequate return on investment? So these are things we should look at. The framework in place now should be overhauled or redrafted or looked into, because we're just going to be down. We're going to be moving 180 degrees, 360 degrees, just dancing around in circles.
You said earlier in your opening remarks, Achike, that you joined protesters in an area of Lagos to accusing the power holding company of unfair treatment.
No. The federal government were questioning the entire privatization.
The protest
exercise
was against the federal government.
Yes,
okay.
Questioning the entire privatization. They attempt that time to privatize.
Was that prior to the?
No, it was prior. It was prior, and I will tell you something. Look, there is another way. It's not just about. There's another way. First of all, I mean, you have done this privatization exercise, and Nigeria is suffering the consequences, just like what the BPE said about the failure, 90% failure in the privatization exercise. We also have failure so far, in the generation and distribution of power in Nigeria. Things are not just working. There is no light in this country anymore. It has gotten worse. You understand? So there is no success. It's not a success. That's one. But you see, there's something that they could have done. For instance, they could have empowered those people who are working within, the electricity company in Nigeria. I'm talking about the thousands of workers that are working with NEPA. So what they would have done is that they can bring in some people if they are not too comfortable about the people that are currently managing that. Bring in contract, managers, people to come and generally run it, and then ensure that workers themselves, who are the people doing all of the work, are given shares. You understand? And I think that the electricity workers, I think under NUI, made that proposal. You understand? Let the workers, because you are saying that some of them are undermining for personal gain and interest and so on, undermining the entire, objective of, generating and distributing energy to Nigerians. So what you do is that you make them stakeholders, and it makes a lot of sense, so that they realize that in undermining this institution that they themselves are undermining, that they're undermining themselves. Let them buy shares. Let them be part owners of this, instead of selling it to political contractors and jobbers, or people, foreigners and the rest. Give it to these people who are already experienced in the knowledge of running this. They can run it. You understand? Let them buy shares. Also throw it up, to the public too. Let the public buy shares, but give a quantum of shares to those people who are working in these institutions. All of these people, then they are owners of this.
But
stakeholders.
Some have argued
I think that was a very innovative argument, that if the government had not been selfish or motivated by other interests, you understand, that are not patriotic, they would have looked at this and said, well, but this makes sense. Because once you're able to give these people this, there's a much greater take, because, all of a sudden they realize that their worldview changes. They must protect this institution, and they must take it to the, because once it does well, you understand? They do well. When they are not able to deliver on energy and people are not able to pay, then there is a diminution in the value of the shares, and the returns that they get. So these are things, but of course they didn't want to do, because what they wanted to do was to buy up all of these companies, and that's why in major cities of the country, people were making. There was a scramble in all the major cities, in Lagos, in Port Harcourt, in Benin, Kaduna. In Ibadan, in Kaduna, and Kano. There was a scramble by powerful people in this country to take over, those particular companies, but not those ones in the rural areas.
Let's take it forward from here now, as we begin to look at what the possibility of what happens next, because they say government is a continuum. You recall also that the Minister of Power at the time had literally warned the incoming administration not to go back on the privatization process of this administration. Many have also identified this drastic discontinuation of such major projects as the bane of development in Nigeria. A situation whereby a new government comes in and totally, pushes under the table the efforts of the outgoing administration. As regards power, what do you expect that the incoming administration does?
Yeah, the first thing I would advise, I recommend is to look at that National Electric Regulatory Bill. It has to be reviewed. That is when we're gonna have. That's when we have power in this country as a nation, because you've decentralized power generation. For instance, River State government produced the gas turbine could generate 500 megawatts of energy. All River State need as a state is 350 megawatts. But that bill still in place says they have to send to national grid. And by the time you send to national grid, River State is not sure of getting like 100 megawatts back when the distribution or transmission starts. So this is the fundamental. So there's no way the incoming administration would not look into this privatization thing. Probably will even throw it out and start a new one. Over time, we have such issues because we have governments in the probably just want to run the business of my government, my people, my allies, my cronies. And if the new government comes, it's coming with its own people as well. Look at how do we exploit, how do we perfect, how do we improve on this, and that naturally brings about either a death of an existing program or policy, or probably an improvement to an hybrid of 2 or 3 policies.
Will that affect the privatization process?
Surely it will, because by the time they take that first step of looking into the National Electric Regulatory Bill, or act, is not an act, but now it's not because it's started into law, then definitely is going to be a change in the power sector.
Are you considering the duration of time this will take and the expectation on the part of Nigerians? Because Nigerians don't seem to be that quite patient for all of the bureaucracy. What they want is give us light and give it to us now.
I will tell you something that's possible for you to generate 5,000 megawatts in 5 weeks in Nigeria. It's possible. It's called hybrid power generation, where you need a bit of wind and water. Hydro power generation. You can have this micro hydro power plants. You have 174 local governments. You could site, and there's no state in Nigeria that doesn't have a river, even Maiduguri. Site these micro power plants in such states, and they generate such power. And in 5 weeks, you can have 5,000 megawatts at a very cheap cost of probably 500 or 50 million euros.
I can see you shaking your head. Is that an agreement or in total disagreement?
No, I agree with him on a matter of the fundamentals, but not the practicality of it or the time frame within which this thing can be done. I agree with him that there are other sources of energy. You have wind and so on. I also agree with him about the micro power plants and so on that you could have in other parts of the country. I also agree with him that you need to tinker with the NERC's, the laws setting it up and their regulations and so on. But I do not agree that you can do that in a span of 5 weeks. It's going to take time. You're going to have people that come in and do the feasibility study. You're going to, after you have done that, you're going to look for the funding. If it's going to be driven by the private sector, you're going to bring in the experts. They're going to do so many things. It's going to take time before that happens.
But why is it that we are not at this time even considering alternatives? He made mention wind, but there's also solar.
The government is very much aware. The government has made statements to the effect that they are looking at other sources of energy in this country. Over the years, they have talked about nuclear. That is also true. You understand? So I do hope that when they set up that nuclear, somebody was suggesting, I think was in my state or so, somewhere in the east, and I said no. Let them set it up somewhere else. Because, I mean, people who cannot even maintain roads, you can imagine what it means, you know, when they are dealing with nuclear energy. You know, but then the reality is that we are talking about the implication of what the government, you know, the expectations, and I think that was what we are talking about, the expectations of the people. And they will give this government time. They always give all governments time. You understand? But the thing is that it is clear that Nigerians are losing patience with their political leaders, and they don't want excuses anymore. That is the level. And I think it's a positive thing that Nigerians are developing to that level where they become much more critical of government and government functionaries and so on. It's a positive thing because it helps to put the politicians under pressure. Now, but the reality is that so much has been destroyed in the last 60 years. And I'm not saying, you know, just like we have all agreed, this thing, the 16 years was a combination of what has happened all the other years before the 16 years. The 16 years, they also added to some of the problems also that they met on ground, and they have not been able to move forward. You need to solve, you know, one of the things that the incoming administration has to do, first of all, is to build an environment, to create an environment where, you know, the right kind of politics will play out in Nigeria. An environment where all the ills that have been generated through this rancorous election, you know, will be put to bed, and Nigerians will begin to see themselves once more as Nigerians, not as Christians, Muslims, pagans, unbelievers, non-believers, northerners and southerners and so on. We are all one. You understand, at least as defined by the constitution of this country. So that is the first step the political leadership in this country has to focus on, to unite the people together, and then to point them in a particular direction, to give them a sense of hope and belief that this thing can be done and that we cannot do it on our own. And then they now begin to look at the issue of corruption that has undermined everything. If you don't do anything about corruption, you're not going to expect any miracle in the energy sector. If you don't do anything about corruption, you're not going to expect anything in the fight against, you know, insurgency and the insurgency and so on and so forth. You just talked about the NNPC. The president-elect has talked severally about that because he has experience. He was once the Minister of Petroleum and so on. So it's an area that is very dear to his heart. So all of these things have to be done. But there are too many things. I won't say too many. The president-elect can take. Somebody said, look, let him just focus on one particular thing and succeed in it. And I said, no. No matter the sector you talk about, if you do not tackle corruption, simultaneously with any other thing you're doing, you're going to fail.
I believe that also should quickly turn our attention to how Hydra added the nature of the challenges we face in this part of the country. The last time I heard the president-elect talked about this, he made mention of the security, talked about unemployment, I think economy, and then before he talked about power. Like what he said, some would say, just come fix power and you'll be celebrated as a god in the histories of Nigeria. But when we come back after this break, we'll touch more on some other issues. Our focus on the show today has been on the challenges being faced. They call it a season of suffering. When you put all of this together, full scarcity, challenges with the power sector, as well as the unpaid salaries in most parts of the country, as well as the very high expectation of most Nigerians of the incoming administration. We'll take a commercial break now, and we'll be back with more to go at.